So throughout history, the people who've been coming to the wilderness for inspiration, to gather their thoughts, to think about life, value, and certainly what our purpose is here on earth, that's the ultimate question. And religions have been debating this subject for well over 2,000 years. Philosophers, they give it a big name, existentialism. Well, I'm neither a philosopher nor a theologian. I'm just a fly fisherman and a photographer. And I'll be discussing some concepts, some of which should be quite thought-provoking. Some of them will be inspirational. Others you may not agree with. And that's okay as well. If you don't agree with some of the concepts, all I ask is you think through it, articulate your arguments, and that process will help solidify your own sense of faith and inner peace. So let's enjoy the journey. Here we go. So for me, this is literally a spiritual journey, trying to gather my thoughts, put it into logic reasoning, and hopefully come up to some conclusion that give me just a better handle on our purpose here on earth. Of course, most of us will ascribe to one school of thought or another, but it seems to me that any extreme view is probably a vector away from the truth. And I think that's ultimately where this discussion is going, is what is the truth? Is there one truth that we can all agree on? I suppose if you were to ask an existentialist what is our purpose here on earth, they would say just to create value in our lives. If you were to ask a religious person, they would say our purpose is to serve God. And a scientist would say our purpose is to propagate and spread our DNA. None of these are emotionally satisfying, which is really the purpose of this whole discussion, this journey, which I'm hoping you will join me, to come up to some more profound understanding of exactly what it is to be on this earth. So the first question which we have to ask is, does God exist? In general, there's three views on the subject, at least according to Frank Turek. He describes a pantheist, which is someone who believes in an impersonal God that is part of, not separate from, the universe. A theist is a creator separate from the universe. And an atheist, of course, is someone who does not believe in God at all. In summary, he says a pantheist would say God is all. A theist would say God made all, and an atheist, no God at all. I personally believe that there's very few true atheists out there. An atheist being someone who believes that we came from nothing and will literally return to nothing, and that's all the value that we create in our lives is for naught and will return to absolute zero. I think most atheists just haven't thought beyond that. And the fact that someone's watching this video, if you do describe yourself as an atheist, would by definition tell me that you're actually an agnostic, meaning someone who's still searching for the truth. You may not understand the truth or begin to contemplate it, but you have a feeling there's a greater entity out there. I mentioned a continuum, which basically goes from one extreme of someone with very profound faith to another extreme of a pure scientist or astronomer. And somewhere in the middle are the philosophers, who seem to give some reason to the whole structure. At least that's their attempt. Incidentally, there was a Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, lived from 1813 to 1855. He was described as a Christian existentialist. And existentialism being defined as a philosophical inquiry that explores human existence, which essentially is what I'm trying to do. When he examined the philosophical structure of faith, he was the one who coined the term leap of faith. And he pointed out that faith would not be necessary unless there was an element of doubt, otherwise it would be fact. When asking the question, does God exist? I cannot just go to the Bible and say, well, God exists because it says God exists. It's written in the Bible. That's a circular argument and it doesn't work for me. So in my college years, I was a biology major. So I think I've always been a naturalist to some degree, so I particularly appreciate these beautiful surroundings here. And I was indoctrinated into the theory of evolution. And that's been part of how I perceive the world throughout decades of my life. But I don't think it's an accurate depiction in and of itself. For instance, I want to discuss microevolution versus macroevolution. With microevolution, species will adapt to the environments which they're in, such as Darwinian finches. They develop smaller beaks, bigger beaks, depending on what resources are available on what island of the Galapagos. Even humans can adapt. In northern climates, we have pale skin. As we get closer to the equator, there's more melanin in our skin, more pigmentation, more protection from the sun. These adaptations develop over many generations. Microevolution is constantly happening. One may even think that the evolutionary process in itself is divinely inspired within that species so they can adapt to that changing environment. As an extreme example, imagine humans had to leave Earth because of famine, overcrowding, what have you, and needed to adapt to life on Mars. In that situation, we would have to change our physiology such that we no longer had to rely on 21% oxygen. And would have to significantly change our heat tolerance as well. But even small changes in our physiology would make surviving on Earth incompatible with life. So the process of adaptation would be deadly, even over the millions of years. And we need to look for a better explanation instead of macroevolution. Therefore, we're going to look towards classical physics to find an equation that's compatible with the biblical creation story. So if we believe in microevolution, which is just adaptation of that species to the changing environment, then that can occur in conjunction with theological or creativity theory, and that evolutionary process is divinely inspired. Again, not macroevolution, because there's no way for creationists or scientists to prove whether one species can evolve to another species over 1 million years. We have no objective data, no way of testing, no way of recording. The Big Bang Theory is based on Einstein's theory of relativity, which is famous for the equation E equals mc squared. So energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So imagine that an incredible amount of energy was put into an infinitesimally small space and then allowed to expand extremely rapidly. When the energy expands, it forms particles, protons, neutrons, electrons. Those particles will coalesce into atoms. They will become elements. The elements will coalesce and eventually become stars and planets in a multitude of galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. What I'm trying to describe here are two coexisting and potentially conflicting truths. Microevolution is compatible with creation theory. A species can adapt to its environment. Although I've begun to agree that macroevolution does not make any sense at all. And when examining Einstein's theory of relativity, science is also compatible with faith. So the Big Bang Theory can also describe the creation process. However, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So where did that initial energy come from? Well, that's the question which we have to decide. Was there a creator? Is there a God? Logically speaking, there had to have been a creator. And we call that creator God. So throughout Europe in the Middle Ages, the church and the state were intimately connected, and any arguments that undermined the credibility of the church also threatened the power and authority of the state or the monarch at that time. So several years later, when Giordano Bruno started talking about the works of Copernicus and the heliocentric universe, he was ultimately tried for heresy and burned at the stake by the Roman Inquisition. Even Galileo was an advocate of the Copernicus theory, and he had to put his thoughts on a back burner for many decades throughout his life. Ultimately, he was allowed to speak in front of the Pope, but he was put on house arrest for the remainder of his life. My point with these stories is the belief system at the time was very, very deeply rooted, and that belief was also the source of the power and authority of the state. And anything contrary to that belief system would undermine the authority of the state. But it did not change the truth. Ultimately, there was one truth, that the sun is the center of our universe and the earth revolves around the sun. Despite the belief system at the time, the truth did not change. There was one truth. That truth always was, it certainly is, and it will continue to be. The truth doesn't change. But is the truth absolute? Well, that seems like a strange question. If the truth was not absolute, then it wouldn't be the truth, correct? Well, this gets back to the matter of the question you're asking. The question was asked from early Christianity: was Jesus all man, or was Jesus all God? And it wasn't until St. Augustine in about 400 AD, he defined Jesus Christ as all man and all God, all human and all deity, both at the same time. So when you ask, was Jesus all man? The answer is yes. Was he all God? Yes. So two truths can exist, even if they're contradictory to each other. Now, as a mortal being, we may not fully know or comprehend the answer as to whether Jesus Christ was all man or all God, but it doesn't change the truth. There was one unwavering answer, and even if we don't fully understand it, we recognize that there is one truth. So belief in a creator requires a leap of faith, at least according to Kierkegaard. But that leap of faith becomes a smaller step when considering the science and the philosophy and the logic reasoning as to whether we have a creator or not. It's completely illogical to believe we have this value in our lives for nothing. As Frank Turek wrote in his book, It Takes More Faith to Be an Atheist, the steps towards understanding and believing in a creator are far smaller than the steps towards being a complete atheist. So in the next section, we're going to talk about our relationship between our human existence on this earth and that creator, and then explore Christianity and Jesus Christ and where he comes into the picture. So, hope you continue to join me on this journey. I'll meet you up there, no, not heaven, at the next link.